Welcome to the story, the ongoing conversation about story. We're glad you're here today. We hope you'll be here in the future as we tell stories and we invite people to tell stories. Our partner today is Joann Langrock, and she is deeply committed to the theater and has been engaged in this for many times and many years. And we're just delighted she can be with us today to talk about her own experiences and to talk about the experiences of theater in Middlebury. So,
Thank you.
Joann,
Thank you, Len.
we'd like to have you share with us.
Well, I do have a passion for theater and have been involved in my adult life. As a child, I was too nervous. I was too shy to get involved. I would admire people who would do that, but I would never do it. But I would go to the theater, and I love it. And how I got into doing theater was through my husband, who has gotten me into all sorts of things. And when we were first here, we came here in 1960, and he ran for state's attorney. And shortly thereafter, he met some people who were involved with the Middlebury Community Players, and they're always looking for men to be actors. And so, of course, he jumped on board very happily and did a lot of, little theater with them. At that time, the Players were playing any place they could. There was no theater for them. The first show that Peter did was actually in a bar, which no longer exists. But it's, I think, where the Bread Loaf Company is got their headquarters now. And he went on and was in a number of plays because he was a good actor. He was enthusiastic and energetic. And he was in one play, I think it was called Mr. Pym's Passes By. And they did that up at Mount Abe, actually. As I say, the Players had no home. They were playing wherever they could. And the director of that show was Joyce Huff, who is a woman who lives up in the Burlington area and has directed many shows for the Players and actually for the Shelburne Players in more recent times. But she said to me, we went out after rehearsal and have a drink down at Mr. Up's, and she said, "Have you ever wanted to get on stage?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." So she cast me as a nun in a play called Suddenly Last Summer. And it's a short play. We did it actually in the Middlebury Inn. And that was my first foray, and I really had a good time. I liked it. And so over the next several years, I would be cast in many roles as nurses and nuns. And, it was fun. I had a good time. The Players were performing 2 or 3 shows a year, and they were mostly straight shows, hardly any musicals at that time, because we didn't have a place to put on a musical. When we did do a musical, the first one that I recall being involved in was Oklahoma, and we did that at the high school. Then I was asked, I was asked to join the board of the Players, and interestingly enough, I think they were probably a pretty low ebb because they asked me to come on as the chair of the board, and I was silly enough to take that on.
They were people of good judgment.
Thank you, Thank you, Len. I don't remember the year it was, but after that, I produced a lot of shows for the Players. We had a really wonderful board, active and interested, people who were interested in acting, people who were interested in the back of what goes on backstage. And Noelle Frimmel was part of that. And she's still, as you know, I hope, still very much involved with theater as the major set designer. And she and her husband build the sets at the Town Hall Theater. Well, fast forward. We had let it be known that we wanted to find a space to build a theater, and that effort had been going on for a long time. And we had accumulated a certain amount of money, which was kind of happy to have. But one day, it was after I was no longer the chair of the board, I got a call from one of the Knights of Columbus, who at that point owned the Town Hall Theater. And it was John Barrera, and he said, Joann, you know, we're all getting old, and we can't really maintain this building, and we want to sell it, and we want to sell it to the players. At that point, the Town Hall Theater was a pretty dungy place. You know, it smelled of cigarette smoke and fat and grease, and it had a bar at one end, and they tried to make a little bit of money to keep it up by letting the motor vehicle department come in and give, you know, driving license tests and this sort of thing. And they did have, you know, wedding receptions and stuff like that. But anyway, they were a small group, and they were tired of what they were doing. So I had just that past year produced Oliver, and I had gotten Doug Anderson to direct it. And it was actually the second show he directed for the Middlebury Community Players, both of which were performed at the high school. And I called up Doug and told him that John had called me and that the Knights wanted to sell the building to the players. But I had the feeling that the players were not in any kind of position to take on that. But Doug might be. So he joined with Dutton Smith Sr. And some other people, perhaps. Dutton was very involved in the players. His son still is. And they went up to see the Town Hall Theater and were not particularly impressed with this dingy building, although it's great on the outside, pretty dingy on the inside at that point, until they went upstairs into what was the balcony, which still existed. There he saw the stenciling on the walls. He saw the beautiful gas chandelier. He saw the top of the proscenium that was still there. And he said, you know, this is going to be real. This has possibilities. So he formed a group of people who worked very hard and essentially got the community involved in buying this Town Hall Theater, in helping to, I mean, we had people like the local judge coming in and taking the boards off the walls and refinishing them and this sort of thing. The community just came out at large. Finally, when it was done, we negotiated, I say we, I wasn't really part of the negotiation, with the Sheldon Museum to have returned the great bell, which had been taken out of the Town Hall Theater by its former owner, Sam Emmerle, which is another story all in itself. The Sheldon Museum has given the bell back to the Town Hall Theater on loan. I understand that's the case. I don't know the details behind that, but I know that there was some consideration about how to get it back there and how to do it. So anyway, it belongs to the Sheldon, but it sits up in the Town Hall, you know, Campanile, where it should be. And the installation of it was a joyous day in town. There was a parade. They put the bell on the back of a truck and they drove it up, and people walked behind it from the Sheldon up to the Town Hall Theater, and they had a terrible time getting it in, but they did. And for 2 hours, people stood in the sunshine walking this thing.
I was one of those.
And you were one of those.
And my wife.
And you and your wife, right? And it was a glorious day, and you know, all the bells in town went off. All the church bells rang, and so this was essentially, you know, the true beginning of the Town Hall Theater as we know it today. it has made a difference in this town. The existence of having a theater which belongs to the community, which the community supported. When we first thought about having this building, we were thinking, oh, you know, maybe a couple $100,000 would put it back in shape. Well, of course, $5 million later, we have this marvelous theater. The players finally had a home. Out of that has grown a whole slew of resident companies that perform all the time in the Town Hall Theater. From a dance company to the community orchestra to Middlebury Actors Workshop, which is a professional acting company. Of course, the Players, the Middlebury College, all of these people have activities at the Town Hall Theater. And they also have encouraged theater participation among youth with summer camps, with youth programs. So it's a delight. It is improved the social aspects of our community. You know, we have always had people move into the community. They want to be here because the college is here, because there's a lot of stuff that you could do at the college. You can sit in on classes. You can go to their performing arts series, all the rest. And then about 15 years ago, a group of people were sitting around having a conversation, and they were all opera lovers. And they said, oh, well, let's do an opera. And so they did. And it was a shortened version of Carmen. And they got this young man who was still in school in Boston to come up and sing the role of Don Jose. The role of Carmen was taken by one of the originators, who was a professional opera singer and sung at the Met. And they put on this lovely performance of Carmen. And the place was a mess. You know, had bats flying around overhead. We've got gerrymandered seating. I remember one person fell through the seating. But that was the start of the Opera Company of Middlebury. I have to confess, I am on that board, and I love it. 15 years later, we're going strong. And we have a beautiful professional company. We just had a great gala of, I think 14 of our singers came back to sing for us for the evening. It was fabulous.
That's a great addition to our community.
Yes, I mean, and you think of a town the size of Middlebury, actually a county the size of Addison County, having access to live professional opera with a good orchestra, wonderful, conductors, and Doug Anderson has a passion for this, and he lends his wonderful theatrical skills as a director to put on shows that are they're unusual and extraordinary.
The line I often heard in different ways about Doug is that Doug knows theater. Doug knows drama.
Yeah.
Doug knows theater.
Yeah, he does.
And he really does.
Yeah.
Thank you for that history. Can I take you back to your husband?
Sure.
And maybe ask you a question about when he was acting. Was he a comedian or drama or? Do you remember some of the roles he?
Drama. Well, he did Blithe Spirit, which was interesting because Blithe Spirit is a really difficult play because it's very repetitive, and he was the lead person, and he had to memorize all these lines, and as I say, they're very repetitive. Let's see, I'm trying to think of where we he did that. I think it might have been the Little Baptist Church next door to the Town Hall Theater.
Oh, yes.
That was put
Yeah.
on. And he did a number of, no, he was a serious actor. He, you know, he was charming, he was energetic, and, you know, he learned his lines,
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
and he performed them well. The interesting part of this is that, of course, he's a trial lawyer. And when other young lawyers would join the firm, he would say, "You've got to go out for a play, because this is good training." And so they did.
Yeah.
You know, Jim Swift, who is an attorney and, you know, a partner of Langrock's very well, is we were in a couple of plays together.
Okay.
And they, you know, it's kind of a lawyerly thing, I think, to be able to act.
I'll bet you they never expected that when they were in law school, that somebody would say, "It's time, you got to get into the theater."
Well, it's also community, you know, a community building too. You
Right.
get out and you meet
Right.
people in the community, and you present yourself out there.
How about yourself in roles? You're nurses and nuns, but was there a role that you really would have, that you always wanted to do?
I did it, I think. Marianne Lust is a woman who lives in Lincoln, and every year she produces a play at the beginning of winter, which is of her own device. She is a trained actress, theater person. And she wanted to do the Tennessee Williams play. I'm blanking on the name of it. It was so long ago. But anyway, she cast me in the lead. And this was a big, big show. And I had to speak with an Italian accent, which was easy for me because I know some Italian. And she shamed me for speaking too much. Can you still hear me? She shamed me for speaking with too heavy an accent. I was Serafina, and I'm trying to remember the name of the play, Tennessee Williams play. It's a very, very famous play. It takes place in New Orleans.
Streetcar Named Desire.
No, it was not Streetcar Named Desire. We just did Streetcar Named Desire with the Opera Company of Middlebury. I really have blanked on the name of the play. But anyway, it was a great, it was a good play.
Right.
And I remember it was The Rose Tattoo.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And Dick Nesson was the male lead. And at that point, Dick had started the bridge school here in Middlebury, but he was also very interested in theater and acted a lot. And he dropped a line, and the line was based upon The Rose Tattoo. And we both looked at each other rather confusedly, and finally somebody came up with a line to go on and continue with it. Gosh, we saw each other not 6 months ago and had a great laugh over that.
Right.
You know, this sorts of things happen, and you wish they didn't. The Rose Tattoo, interestingly, was performed in the basement of St. Mary's School.
Oh, okay.
I told you the plays went the players went everywhere.
Every place, right.
We did a show in Chart Villa, in which I acted, called the Aspirin Papers. It was a show that I had seen in London, and I loved that show. And I got a good friend of mine, Martha Mathis, to direct it, so that I could act in it, which I did. It was a good show.
Good.
And we did things in the Marble Works when it was still it was still pretty a scary place to go when they were trying to rebuild it. There was one large room which the players took over for a couple of years and did shows in. I directed a show there called The Dining Room. So anyway, I've done a lot with the players.
Do the players still do performances in places other than Town Hall Theater?
Well, you know, that's where we saw each other.
So
we saw each other in the coffee house.
Okay.
And because they have what they call Company B now.
Okay.
And they do little shows there. Yes, they do perform at the high school still.
Yeah.
They do have dates set at the Town Hall Theater.
Right.
They have to, I mean, they promised dates at the Town Hall Theater, but the Town Hall Theater is so heavily booked that if they want to do things in other places, they will do them in other places. I don't know if recently they've done any shows at ART, which is the theater at the vocational center,
Right.
which is a little black box theater,
Right.
and actually a nice space to work in.
Right.
But they have, as I said, they've done stuff at the high school.
Black boxes are good.
Yeah,
they're really
yeah. Well, it's like the little theater at the coffee house.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
When were you remember the years when you were chair of the board?
During the late 60s?
Late 60s?
Yeah, I think from the late 60s on through the late 70s.
I went and read through the long list of all the plays going back to 1959.
Yeah.
The first play was Visit from a Small Planet.
That's right. That was before I was here. Yeah.
I don't know that play at all, but
I don't either.
But I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting way to start, you know.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like went through the time when the number of plays increased back in the 70s and in the 80s, and then in the 90s it seemed to go back to 2 plays. Was that kind of the hit?
I guess so. I guess so. Interesting. The list you looked at is a selective list, and there are a lot of shows that aren't.
Okay.
That are not.
This was on the website.
Oh, it was on the website, so that you probably looked at the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with venue, where we could be.
Right.
But once we have the Town Hall Theater, we now do, the 2 shows that are set, one in October, one in March, approximately.
Yeah.
And then if they want to do other shows, which the board has decided they want to do now, of course, they've moved this Company B into the little theater. But I'm not on the board of the Community Players anymore, so I'm not up to date with exactly what goes on. But one thing I can say is I'm absolutely thrilled with the enthusiasm that they demonstrate in putting on productions. And the group has grown, and there are a lot of people that are involved in it. When I came on board, as I said to you earlier, I believe, they asked me to come on as the chair of the board, and I think that they were desperate, and they're just trying to build up a little bit, and so we did good work. We put on good shows. We had fun.
What's the difference between being a performer and being a producer? I mean, what's that like to jump from one role to the?
Being a performer is. That's fun and exciting. I mean, there's the intellectual challenge of determining who you are in your role, and then having to learn your role, and then the cooperation with other people on stage. I mean, this is a group effort, and everybody has to work together and support each other. You depend upon each other. It's like Dick dropping that line in the Rose Tattoo. And we had to sort of search together to see, okay, now how do we get to where we want to be? Acting is very satisfying and very fun. Producing is not. Producing is asking people to do things all the time.
Yeah.
And I much prefer to direct because then I can tell people what to do all the time. That's not true. That's not true.
I know.
No, when I direct a show, I enjoy directing a lot because, again, it's collaborative. And you sit around and you talk about, okay, who are we? What are we doing? How are we getting there? And as a director, I can move people around on stage, and I can, can develop what the stage is going to look like, and get people to help me do that. The producer is the person that gets people to help people do that. And I've often produced the shows I've directed because I've found that maybe that works better for me. but I've also enjoyed having wonderful producers, come forth and be very helpful.
Yeah. You took us right up to this great history. I've known part of that history because I've lived here through part of that time. And, But what do you think? What's your view for the future? Why theater? I mean, why should people be enthusiastic and participate and engage in theater? So, can you answer that big question?
That's a very big question.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's a very individual response that I have to find. People do theater because, well, it's a literary thing, for one. For two, it's to provide entertainment, to provide thought. I've never even thought about why. It's just sort of there, and thank God it is there, because people love to go to the theater. It's an immediate thing. You're there with real people in front of you, telling you a story, and you certainly do understand the value of story, or demonstrating their skills as actors, dancers, singers, whatever, or musicians. It gives an outlet for all of this artistic bent, which is a good thing. Theaters can be very, very powerful. The play that we saw about gun control, essentially, and politics, was a very powerful play. It was a little play. Yeah. It was done well, I thought.
It did.
But it was powerful, and it gets you to think. But I don't think that's necessarily the base reason for all theater. I think theater is a venue for people who like to get on stage and show off. It's a venue for people who have special talents, and we can all enjoy those talents. It's a place for creativity, and then people enjoy being creative. People enjoy seeing creative things. It's tough. Personally, why? For me, I have no idea. I have no idea. I just have always loved theater. I've gone to theater all my life. I'm not particularly talented. I can't sing or dance particularly well, although I did try. I was in the community chorus doing a Gilbert and Sullivan. Probably the first thing I ever did here at Middlebury. And but it's, I don't know. Maybe it depends on the individuals.
Well, that's a great answer, though. I mean, brothers.
It's a meandering, long-winded answer.
Well, it's an exploration.
That's true.
Because we don't know, but what I clearly hear you saying is, it's really something worth investing yourself in.
It certainly
like those young lawyers that got advice.
That's right.
That you should be in a play.
Yeah, right. And you learn how to present yourself in public.
Right.
And you're right. If you're going to be on stage, I mean, it's not an unusual thought that lawyers actually are actors, particularly trial lawyers, because that's what they do. They get up and they tell a story, and to tell it well, have a little training never hurts. But the thing I love about being in a play in any capacity is the collaborative effort of a whole group of people you may never have ever known in your life, or people who are close friends. It doesn't matter. You get together and you're a pretty solid group.
Yeah.
And
you become. It's not a surprise that the word is company.
That's right.
For the theater.
That's right.
You become part of the company.
Part of the company, right? The town hall, the opera company in Middlebury, when they set down a few rules for themselves, and one of them was that we will never hire a diva, a person who is so self-important that they cannot work with the rest of the group, and that's important, and it's true because we have a very wonderful group of professional singers that love to come back here because we treat them as human beings.
Yeah, yeah.
We treat them well.
Do you see new things on the horizon coming with Town Hall Theater?
You know, I'm not an integral part of the Town Hall Theater at this point. I am just like you. I'm an audience member.
Right, right.
But I am on the board of the Opera Company of Middlebury, which is pretty well stated. I mean, we have 2 productions we do a year, and I don't think we're in a rut at all. I think we're very, you know, very.
Well, that's exciting. So the beat goes on, right?
Absolutely.
The beat goes
Absolutely.
on. Well, it's been delightful to spend this time talking to you and listening to you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you have been listening to me.
Well, this is sheer delight.
Well, thank you.
To hear how important story is to you, and
Yes.
and how you see it in relationship to the world, and particularly in terms of community life.
Yes.
And collaboration.
Yes.
And are you going to take on another role sometime in the future? No. Okay.
No, I'm my role now is audience. Audience and booster.
Booster.
Yes.
An image that a friend of mine would add to that, or share along with that, is being the balcony people.
Yes.
And he always talked about when he was talking about the fact that he would sit in the balcony and give you and applaud and give you support.
That's right. That's right. I'll
So
be a clack for anybody.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Len.
I've
It's been
enjoyed
fun.
this time.
Fun. Mm.
Okay. Thank you for being part of our conversation. See you another time. Take care.